My name is Cynthia Clark. I'm an Oaklands resident, and I'm the current co-chair of the steering committee for the Oaklands Neighborhood Plan, otherwise known as the ONP. I'm honored to welcome you all to Forward 50, a night of discussion to generate ideas and solutions for the Oaklands neighborhood, 50 years into the future. As a settler and newcomer to this Lekwungen territory on which the university stands, I feel it's important to go beyond territory acknowledgement. Last Thursday, with the introduction of Bill 41, BC became the first province in Canada to implement the UNDRIP. This new legislation recognizes the rights of Indigenous people and ensures that they are part of the decisions that affect them, their families, and their traditional territories. And this is traditional Indigenous territory. So how do we, the ONP, ensure that people, especially Indigenous people, are part of the decisions that affect them, their families, their neighborhoods, and their traditional territories? The ONP is a group of residents, volunteers, and business owners doing our best to answer that question. We are using participation tools such as farmers market pop-ups, online and door-to-door surveys, community mapping and visioning workshops, and 2 final design charrettes. This is all in an effort to engage as many people as possible in a meaningful process to define neighborhood values and issues, and to develop a vision for Oaklands for the next 50 years. And the vision will feed into the city's official community planning process 2 years from now. The importance of this participatory planning process is not to be overlooked. This is the first time that the City of Victoria has supported a community-led planning process, and we are so grateful. We want to express our gratitude to the city for all of their support, and I would like to thank Councillors Shamarke Dubois and Ben Izzet, as well as Mayor Lisa Helps. Welcome and thank you. I'd also like to introduce Councillor Ben Izzet, who would like to say a few words.
I'm going to be brief because there's some outstanding speakers tonight. First of all, I want to thank the Oaklands Community Association, the staff, the board members, the volunteers for putting on this really important event. I think just looking at the list of speakers and topics underscores the visionary and progressive nature of the neighborhood planning process that the community's initiating with this event. And I think when we look at the scale of the challenges that confront not only Oaklands and not only our city and region, but the whole world, this I think is exactly the type of community-based grassroots response and grassroots policy-making exercise that we need. And whether those challenges are the ecological crisis arising from our capitalist economy, or the social injustice and the social crisis arising from that economic inequality in our community, I think this is how we're going to find a path out of all of the challenges we face globally. There's certainly massive challenges, and if we can find solutions within the context of existing economic and political and social relationships, I would welcome that. But I think that if we find over the course of our conversations that we have to look around the corner and see what kind of changes in relationships between people, changes in the relationships between people and the land may be necessary to achieve real sustainability, I hope we'll be open to having those hard conversations. And so the City of Victoria is happy to support this process. My colleague, Councillor Shamarke Dubois, is here tonight. I believe our colleague, Councillor Sarah Potts, is going to be coming a bit later tonight. And so on behalf of our Mayor and Council, I really want to thank you for beginning this process and indicate that we will continue to support these efforts And I think it's not too much to say, given the very integrated and visionary approach we're seeing tonight, that Oaklands will end up with not only the most progressive neighborhood plan in the city, but very possibly the most progressive neighborhood plan in the country. So thanks to all of you.
Thanks so much, Ben. My name is Chris Holt. I'm the Executive Director of the Oaklands Community Association, and I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. How many people in this audience are from Oaklands? Beautiful. Look at that. That's fantastic. So, we're all here together because, there's a lot of pressure that's going to be coming down on this neighborhood in the next 50 years. So, it's you folks in this room and anybody else we can drag into this process who are going to make the changes and set the values for the future development in this neighborhood. I'm the MC tonight, which is really about trying to keep the speakers on their time. We're going to try to get everybody doing it in 10-minute segments, so we're not here till midnight. But they're going to be fascinating to listen to, so that's going to be hard to do. But I'm going to have to be that kind of tough guy that says, hey, 1 minute, hey, 30 seconds, stop. So I'll do my best and I'll try to be as kind and budget as possible. The stage lights? What the stage lights? I'll poke around with the lights and see what we get. But probably that will be good for the Facebook feed, right? So, Councillor Izzet kind of stole my introduction about the crisis that we're facing in the environment. But our first speaker tonight, Dr. Trevor Hancock, has been working on this issue for a long time. You can read his bio in the sheet that we handed out. I'm not going to introduce everybody's bio, otherwise we will be here till midnight. So I printed them all, trying to be efficient. But Dr. Hancock, come up and tell us how we can help and what we need to do in our neighborhood to
Okay, well, good evening. It's nice to see you all here. I am going to jump straight into this. I have two jobs tonight. The first job is to talk about the future, and the second is to talk about the One Planet idea. So let me jump right into thinking about the future. Part of my career has been as a health futurist. My friend James Robertson said this many years ago. Thinking about the future is only useful and interesting if it affects what we do and how we live today. So this is not blue sky stuff. This is about what we think the future might be, but also what we want the future to be, which is much more important. So first of all, let's start with the fact this is Oakland's Forward 50. 50 years is a long way ahead to think. If you think back to the year of the moon landings, what did we think the future would be like in 1969? Clearly, straight after the moon landings, everyone was thinking, well, we'll also settlements on the moon quite soon. That didn't pan out. Smartphones weren't really, they were science fiction back in 1969. Climate change was not really on the agenda in 69. I don't think anybody thought of Viagra or of Facebook. So there's a lot of social changes that happen incredibly quickly, and especially in these days. On the other hand, the built environment is much more locked in. It doesn't change as rapidly. It does change, and you can, if you look outside on the table, there's a couple of maps. I wish I'd had them earlier. I could put them in the slideshow. But one is from 1926 and one is from 90 years later, 2017. The basic structure of the neighborhood hasn't changed in 90 years, and it's probably not going to change in the next 50 years in any major way. What you have within those physical parameters may change, but to a certain extent, a lot of it's locked in. On the other hand, we do big things like new sewage treatment and things like that, which change the infrastructure. So it's a combination of those social changes and the physical changes, and obviously in terms of the neighborhood plan, you're primarily focused on the physical changes, but there's a community that lives here, and so the social changes are every bit as important. Back in 1939, there were tram lines in Victoria. There were tram lines near here. Those are gone, but no reason why they couldn't come back. So we can look to the past to learn some lessons from the future too. When we think about the future, a Canadian futurist, Norman Henshaw, about 30 or more years ago, 40 years ago, talked about these four sorts of future. The possible future is all the things that could happen, gets you off into science fiction. The plausible is a somewhat narrower cone of what could happen. And I'm just going to show you a cone, in fact, and I'll flip back and forth a bit. So the outer, today is on the left, and as you go out into the future, the possibilities expand. The widest realm of the cone is the possible. But then there's the plausible, which is a somewhat narrower cone. Throw out the science fiction stuff that transgresses the laws of physics and other stuff we think really is not going to happen. Although it could, but not very likely. That leaves you with the plausible. But then too often what we think about is the probable. And Eric will probably touch on this, but he just mentioned to me a study out of PSIC about, or PICS or somewhere, about how to the electricity demands of cars if they all went electric. But apparently it assumes the same number of cars and the same kind of transportation as we have today. That's planning kind of by the rear view mirror. That could change dramatically. But I think the most important future is the preferable future, what we want to have happen. And if you notice here, right in the center is a little dot, that's the probable future. So that's where we think we're going. I have a futurist friend who says, well, the least likely future is the probable future, because it assumes that the future will be like the past, and it won't. But what's more important is the preferable future, which often diverges from the probable. So what do you actually want as opposed to what you think you're likely to get? And it is that path that we need to be exploring. What sort of future, not do you think is going to be done to Oaklands? What's your probable future? Whether you like it or not. But what's the preferable future? How do you want to shape the future? What do you want it to look like? What sort of community do you want your children and grandchildren to be living in? So the most important future is the one we prefer. And good futures work, which is what I've tried to do over my career as a health futurist, is to help people think more effectively and more creatively about the future they want and how to get it. And that's what this exercise is all about. So it's an exercise in participatory planning, but participatory futures too. So it's in that context that I want to then talk very quickly and briefly about the One Planet Challenge, which when you came in you saw some reference to that on the screen there. The problem is this, and it's very simple. In Canada, we act as if we had this. Our ecological footprint is 4.75 planets worth per person as a country. Now, here in Victoria, it's a little bit less than that. We act as if we had this at the moment, a little around 3 planets worth. Either way, I don't know whether you've checked recently, but this is what we have. So that is the challenge in a nutshell. We act as if we had somewhere between 3 and 5 planets worth of planets that we can use, and we can't. We've got 1 planet. So how do we live within the limits of that 1 planet? And there's a big equity component to this, which is that we as a country, we as a community, are using far more than our fair share of the Earth's biocapacity and resources. And what that means is other people elsewhere on Earth are not getting their fair share. And in the case of low-income countries, they're getting so much less than their fair share that they can't meet basic human needs. So there's a big global social justice issue here. There's also a local social justice issue. Currently doing some work with Diana Gibson of the Community Social Planning Council, and in our conversations for One Planet Region, we're going to be looking at some of the social justice implications of going to a One Planet Region. Who wins, who loses, how is equity affected around food or energy or transportation or housing. In some cases it could be good news, in some cases it could be bad news, but we need to explore that. So what we're going to have to do nationally is reduce our ecological footprint by 80%, and locally by around 65 to 70% at least, in order to be living a one planet way of life. But the trick is, how do we do that while at the same time meeting basic needs and ensuring high levels of human and social development for everybody. So it's not just can we reduce our footprint, we probably could, it might be a bit brutal, but the question is how do we do that while maintaining a good quality of life and good health, and doing so equitably, doing so for everyone. And so if you look at the ecological footprint, which was done by Jenny Moore and Cora Holdsworth quite recently for Saanich and Victoria, a very large chunk of it, almost half, is from food, which isn't necessarily part of your neighbourhood plan, but parts of it are going to be. 29% is from transportation, or 25%, round that, a quarter anyway, and then another 20% almost around buildings, which is building energy and the building the energy to operate them. I'm not going to go into the details of this, but I will touch on it. About 3/4 of the food footprint is from meat, fish, eggs and dairy. About 3/4 of the transportation footprint is private vehicles, and about 3/4 of the building's footprint is operating energy. So if you're thinking about becoming a one planet region, these three areas of diet, private vehicles and building energy are three of the ones where you need to be thinking about what would that mean if we had to reduce those quite dramatically in our neighbourhood. How would that affect our way of life? How would it affect the way we plan and operate our neighbourhood? And this is some of the steps that they were suggesting, which are not surprising because they follow quite logically. Reduction in fossil fuel emissions in buildings, in fact eliminating them, converting gasoline to electric. Now Eric would tell you, of course, quite rightly, that it's also about walking, biking, public transit, all of that, and not having to use cars. Reducing purchase of non-food consumables, less stuff, in other words. We're going to have less stuff, which frankly would be a really good thing. And reduce meat and dairy, which is good for your health, actually. So there are health co-benefits of doing much of this. You reduce air pollution too, and so on. So it's that interaction between the ecological and the social and the health and then also the economic that is really important. And the Rockefeller Foundation and the Lancet, in a commission on planetary health, had this to say: we have been mortgaging the health of future generations to realise economic and development gains in the present. Clearly, we can't do that. That is not just a matter of social justice today, this is a matter of intergenerational justice. So what are the issues of intergenerational justice that come into all of this, so that we preserve and protect and in fact enhance the environmental legacy that we leave to the next generation? Our responsibility, Jonas Salk said, our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors. So I leave you with the challenge of how do we become good ancestors here in Victoria. And as Ben said, I think we can establish a model for the country, and that's what we should be trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hancock. Wonderful. When you were talking, I had a thought that, we all know it takes a village to raise a child. And so I thought, right now it's taking a child to raise the consciousness of the planet, right? Greta Thunberg. So next speaker is Nicole Chelan. She's a community economic development specialist, as you can see in her bio, and she's going to talk about housing in Victoria. So the lighting situation, we're doing a Facebook live stream, so I can play with the lights if you want me to. So you can keep it brief.
What up, Oaklets?
I'm doing with this title right now. Okay. What can a neighborhood do to increase housing affordability? So we have just experienced the biggest construction boom in Victoria, and at the same time, we have also experienced a big uptick, a lot of pressure on the housing market, big uptick in rents, big uptick in rapid price escalation of housing prices. House prices went up 60% in 5 years. A severe uptick in housing precarity. The Victoria Tenant Action Group, together with the Community Council, recently surveyed 500 renters. 75% of them said they live in fear of being forced to move. That's housing precarity. The community is going to redo the point-in-time homelessness count this spring, and I expect we will see an increase in homelessness. So this is all happening during the largest construction boom since the 70s. We know there's some relationship, but we need a story to help tell us how these dots are connected. There's a lot of different drivers of price escalation, low interest rates, fear of missing out, even an inflow of construction workers who are moving to the city to work in the construction boom. But we're going to talk about one cause of price escalation that isn't discussed very well in Victoria, and that's speculative gain. David Harvey traces our changing relationship to housing through tales of 3 different cities. One is called the City of Use Value, this other is called the City of Exchange Value, and the third is called the City of Speculative Gain. Harvey grew up in post-war Britain. He describes the house that he grew up in, much like this typical Oaklands house, I imagine. It was where people could sleep, eat, do their homework, listen to the radio. It was where the family could experience all of their complexities and tensions, mostly away from the outside, away from interference from the outside world. Houses were for living in. This is what Harvey calls the City of Use Value. In the 80s, Britain and Canada entered a new era, what Harvey calls the City of Exchange Value. If you remember, interest rates went up 20%. A lot of people lost their homes. And so people became really preoccupied with the exchange value of homes. How much can I sell my house for? What is the value of my house? And as homes became a really important source of wealth and financial security, attitudes towards renting worsened, and attitudes towards social housing became paternalistic, perhaps even punitive, I would say. And by the end of the 90s, Canada's sort of internationally acclaimed, award-winning national housing program was all but kaput, and we stopped building 20,000 units of social housing every year. So at the end of the century, the emphasis of how we relate to housing changed again, beginning of this century. Harvey writes, the house was viewed as an instrument of capital accumulation and speculative gain. It became an ATM machine from which people could extract wealth. Credit and liquidity sloshed through housing markets, driving prices hither and thither. But behind this shift, a far more monstrous power emerged. The focus was not on the house, but on the land which it stood. The gap between the value, by the way, you can find thousands of these books on Amazon. Just do a quick search for real estate riches, and there's thousands of books you can buy. So the gap between the value of what exists on a house, this is what exists on a piece of land, and what could exist is where speculative gain reaches for. This is the wealth from which the City of Speculative Gain creates. Most cities have not quite figured out how to capture this wealth for the common good. Most cities are creating this wealth for private investors. So the city creates
liquidity is the main driver of price escalation. And this study found that the very act of neighborhood planning increases land values and rents. So you will be forgiven for thinking there's no solution to this global problem, but guess what? There is. And Victoria, our very own city, is on the leading edge. City of Victoria has implemented significant policy changes, such as there is now much greater transparency and accountability in affordable housing projects. There is one definition of housing affordability, and it must be applied consistently whenever there's affordable housing projects. Moreover, you have to identify that a definition of housing affordability is now tied to people's incomes, not to the market. This is the first time in about, 25, 30 years that we have had this. So it is a policy tool, and we're starting to see some impacts. The city also implemented an inclusionary housing policy, and this policy requires a couple of things. If you want to build a very large condo project, 20% of the units must be affordable rentals or rental housing. So if you have a 100-unit building and you want 80 of the units to be condos selling at whatever you can get for them on the market, and 20 have to be nonprofit rentals. Or you can build a 100-unit building that's all rentals. So this is to incentivize developers to build something the community strongly desires, which is purpose-built rentals, brand new purpose-built rentals, which will not put people at risk of demoviction or renoviction in a good long time, because they're brand new buildings. So this is starting to work. From November 8th, 2018 to September 19th, same year, 2019, this is what was approved by the City of Victoria. 821 new homes were approved by the City of Victoria, and a whopping 74% of all homes approved are purpose-built rentals in the past year. So, yeah, the city does have tools to affect the housing market, and the City of Victoria is starting to use them, and we are already seeing the results. It's also worth mentioning that 11% of the homes are fully decommodified. They cannot be in the speculative market. And an additional 3% are price restricted. We do have a lot more work to do. This also shows that there is a massive undersupply of homes for the poorer half of our community. So what we really need to do is build a ton of decommodified and deeply subsidized housing in order to return to a city of use value. We need to really ramp up our nonprofit stock a lot. This graph shows that Canada has the second most privatized housing system in the OECD. And this one shows that Canada has the second highest rate of homelessness in the same countries. So what can a neighborhood do? You can ask for decommodified housing in your neighborhood, and all neighborhoods should be doing this. During your local planning process, you can identify sites for social housing. This is Camas Gardens. This is a few blocks from my house. This is owned by Pacifica. It's mixed income housing. People who were formerly homeless move into here and have housing security. This is a beautiful, beautiful building that anyone would be proud to live beside. This is Mount Edwards. It's famous. Opened up a couple of years ago. Seniors housing, people that were formerly homeless. There's been no problems since this opened. I'm almost done here. I just want you to meet Albert Leung. He is the Vice President of the Community Association at Marpole. He lived in the neighborhood of Marpole for 18 years. Marpole, you may remember, protested modular housing so heavily that they even tried to get a court order to stop it from coming. Albert Leung says, it may be a little belated, but let me officially say welcome. And this is Charlie Smith. He lives in the Marpole modular housing. Since moving have our unwanted behaviors within the privacy of our own home. We can have our emotions, we can have our pride, we can fight with our loved ones, all within the privacy of our home. If you are a homeless person, you have to do all of that outside. So the solution to the problem of unwanted behaviors in public, homeless people, is homes. That is the solution.
Thanks for letting me go over.
Lunch and go. Introduce our next speaker here. Just note on the board the URL. If you are thinking something tonight that stimulates a thought and you want to contribute, if you go to our website, oaklands.life/forward50 speakers, there's a blog on there and you can comment on there and add your thoughts about tonight's topics on there. Now I'm going to introduce Carrie Schuler. Again, you have her bio on your sheets there.
So hi everybody, as you know, my name is Carrie Schuler, I'm the general manager at Hillside Shopping Center. And I bet all of you are here because you think I'm gonna tell you what's going to be on the scene. No. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about what happens 50 years from now, not next year. So, I'm here to tell you about retail and shopping centers in the next 10, 20, 50 years. When you hear the word sustainable, what do you think of? You think of energy and water conservation, you think about waste management, recycling, you think about green business practices. And so do we. And Hillside has a very strong commitment to the environment and does a number of things extremely well in terms of our sustainability. We practice responsible property management. We've been awarded the highest level of certification from BOMA, which is the Building Owners and Managers Association. It's an international association. We've been awarded platinum level through them, and we've also been awarded greenhouse gas reduction leadership award. consumers will come in and try the piece on, and they'll wander off and order it on their smartphone. Or they'll go to the e-lounge that is now incorporated in the shopping center, and they'll try everything on, and then they'll order it all from the computers that are in the e-lounge, or they have a cup of coffee, or a pedicure, or a relaxing chat with someone else that's also doing their e-shopping in the e-lounge. Stores will be tech heavy. They'll be equipped with smart change rooms that when you check in, it reads code on whatever it is you're going to try on and suggests other pieces that will go with whatever it is you've got, that little black vest that you're going to wear. There'll be interactive unmanned ordering kiosks. So all you do is you choose what you want, you try it on in your smart dressing room, and then you walk out and order it on the kiosk. Deliver it straight to your home. Or to the e-lounge. Digital checkouts, interactive activities, and events. Many retailers will incorporate those in their new offerings to interest you, get you into their store to hear about how a product is made, how a product is sustainable. And retailers in the future will depend much less on inventories and much more on creating a personal branding experience directly with you. So what does that mean for the shopping center? It means we'll share in those technologies, we'll create new technologies, we'll use shopping apps, we already do. That Remote is already in place in Hillside Shopping Center, so we didn't even have. You get a daily email with all of the offers pushed out by some of your favorite stores. Those will expand. That one is now working on a new app. When you walk through the shopping center, it wakes up and tells you when you're standing in front of it. Oh, come on, we have 20% off today just for you. Payment systems that are mobile. You walk past with your phone and pay with your product and then just walk out the door. Smart parking lots that tell you where there's parking spaces available and exactly where they are, so you don't have to try them. Sophisticated interactive websites and other digital in-center directories will be part of this. And every day will be a new tech experience for shoppers. That will be the goal of the shopping center, so why would we do that? That's in the not so distant future. But what happens is those retail units downsize and we have all that leftover space? Well, millennials are not interested in buying as much as we did. And as you heard from Dr. Hancock earlier, we're going to need to reduce our consumables. So as our consumables reduce, those areas will be taken up by dining experiences and entertainment experiences. Some will be restaurants, event spaces, libraries, gyms, even places of worship right inside your shopping center. The shopping center will become the place to go and be seen and socialize. It will become the hub and the center of your social life in your community. And last but not least is at Home Sweet Home. Many shopping centers will be morphing into use buildings. They will integrate not only all of the things I just told you about, dining, gyms, libraries, event spaces, maybe even bars and nightclubs, churches, and homes. So a lot of shopping centers will include residential to buttress what they're already doing with their retail and take up some of that leftover retail space from when it downsizes because we don't need to buy as much of it anymore. So realistically, some of those mixed-use properties will include office and medical space. And they become the perfect 20-minute neighborhood in and to themselves. So perhaps they are the new definition of sustainability. That's not really what we're right? Exactly. And even less than that. That's right. And uptown. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Gary. So you can kind of see where we're going tonight here. Right? We're throwing out all of these different ideas to everybody for you to sort of take all these different thoughts and have them gel in your mind, and so that you can then come back to cooperate and to bring your ideas forward for the whole planning process for Oaklands. We have Ava Olson. Ava's a student at Vic High and has put together a video presentation for us. So we'll play it first, then she'll talk.
to see more affordable housing in Oaklands.
I would like to see more affordable childcare in our community and increase in green spaces. I'd like to see free transit for youth.
Better compost and recycling programs in Oaklands. More open ground for children, youth, and families to spend time together.
That main park to be built in the next 50 years in Oaklands. I'd like to see a stronger soccer community in Oaklands.
I want to see more affordable childcare in the community because I'm planning on having kids and also working.
60 years, I would like there to be more nature, less polluted, less smoky. Stop cutting down trees and using less plastic.
It is important to listen to the youth of our community since the future of our generations is in their hands. Our youth require education, cultural awareness, and perseverance in order to maintain the prosperity of our city.
I'm gonna try and make this short because I feel like we're running low on time. But I'm Eva. I'm a member of Vic High's leadership team as well as the youth representative on Oakland's steering committee. I'd like to acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen people on whose traditional territory we stand today, as well as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I strongly believe that it is important that I stand here tonight representing the youth of this community. And I'm honored to be able to showcase just a few of the most empowered our community has to offer. We right now, you right now, are the role models for our future generations. The generation who will really be impacted by this 50-year plan. And I have seen firsthand how wonderful, inspiring adults can create wonderful, inspired children. When I walk around Oakland speaking with community members, I find the children to be the wisest of them all. They talk about deforestation, racism, electric cars, cigarettes, and green spaces, things I didn't even know a 6-year-old knew or cared so much about. All of their answers were not only adorable, but thought-provoking. Unfortunately, a lot of them couldn't be in the video due to some technical difficulties. But at 6, 7, and 8 years old, they knew exactly what our community and our world needs. Their solutions are plain and simple, and their voices are more powerful than ever. Now, Oakland is an amazing community, we all know that, and as part of what makes it so special is the sense of belonging so many people feel when they live, work, or play in our community. One little girl said to me, I want more kindness in our community because I love right now seeing so many people pitching in and helping each other. So why don't we do exactly that? Let's build a community that is accepting, a community based off of kindness, a community where we work together to build strong relationships. So I urge you now, tomorrow, at some point, to listen to your children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandchildren, because in 50 years' time, the decisions about this community will no longer be yours. The decisions you make today will impact them, and this community will be in our hands. This world will be in our hands. So empower the children, empower the youth, because united we can do anything. The future is ours to create, so let's make it good. Thank you.
That's leadership right there. Thank you so much, David. We also have David Clark who's doing the video up here as well. We're going to have right now, we're timing-wise, we're doing fantastic, folks. And thank you so much for the speakers for just digging right in there. That's great. We're going to have a break now so that we can network and you can talk to some of the speakers and talk to each other. And that will have 15 minutes, so 8:20. Back here for some more great speakers. Thank you so much. Hey, that's great. We have our next speaker is James Dreiger. He's coming all the way from Vancouver to talk to us. Give him a hand for that.
Hello, everybody. One of the nice things, and it doesn't have a big title up there, but one of the nice things about being a volunteer is that you get to pick your topic, and so I picked the one with smart in it. So just like the other bearded guy with the doctor title, we got to stick together on this. So I started growing the beard when I heard I was up against some stiff competition here. I was going to say, nice start. It'll take you a few months, but keep at it. It's itchy. So one of the things that, and again, what I like about the concept here is that there's actually a really good diverse audience of people coming to something like this for the betterment of the community. And one of the things that happens is, for me, I'm not an Oaklands resident, but my son is. So you guys, I don't know if that makes you lucky or unlucky, but it depends if you know my son. But one of the things that happens is you have this opportunity as a community, and I don't think every community is the same way or neighborhood. And as a group, you have this amazing opportunity to compile all of the knowledge and learnings from people within the community and without to the betterment of everybody. And again, as was talked about earlier, what you set up as a template for your community for this plan might benefit others outside of the community as well, which is the ripple effects of, you drop the stone and you don't always know where it goes, but this is a really amazing thing that you're putting together. So the topic of the smart community concept, or the smart neighborhood or city or whatever you want to call it, is that how can the technology benefit our lives? What is it with the technology? And we've already heard about the Hillside Mall and how technology was an upheaval, but now they've kind of been through that bit of a struggle maybe, and now they're coming out the other side, and they're better and stronger for it. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So there's some struggles with the technology. As we all know, technology isn't always good, but it's us who can make it good, can make it better. And one thing that I would say about the smart city concept is that it sort of touches on almost all the topics and the speakers tonight and what they do, whether it's housing, the mall. Housing might not directly benefit from a smart city, but the talk about the benefits of having rental housing, you can ask for amenities to put conduit down the frontage of a new development, and it might not benefit you now, but in years as you grow out your conduit system, now you can pull in a cable for the community. Now you can look at stuff like smart signs, like digital signs that can notify you of meetings like this, or like something like on Haltane or whatever, we're going to have some community event or something down there. In some ways, the smart community concept is already coming here. It's already part of our lives, and we just take it for granted. Like I did a walk with my dad through the community a few months ago, and one of the things that you already have is you've got Hydro smart meters, you've got Shaw Wi-Fi at the parks, TELUS has done fiber to the home for the city-wide area, and so you already have access to a whole bunch of things that you haven't even had to do anything. But again, it comes down to how are you going to take advantage of that technology to benefit yourself? How are you connecting your facilities? How are you using it to save money? How are you using it like you can use it for cameras, for security, traffic. You can do bus signs. You can have smart, like I know they've trialed it in other places where they have a sign that tells you how many minutes away the bus is from the stop. So, if you're going online, you can view where it's going to be. You can save yourself time, money, and effort by knowing where, when a bus is going to be there. You could use it for ambulances to control the traffic. If they need to get through, they could have control of the lights as they're coming to the hospital. There's all sorts of things that the technology can do to benefit your community. And part of it is you have an opportunity with this group and outside of the group, the residents, to come up with a plan for what you want for your neighborhood. And again, the ripple effects, it will also impact, I believe the city representative was here. The things that you come up with here will help to guide and recommend what happens with your community. And so there's all sorts of challenges with anything like technology, A lot of it right now is controlled by the commercial carriers, TELUS, Shaw, Rogers, Bell, and so on. But you also, the government, federal government's changed the rules so that now you can also get into it. You can connect a community facility and save money by connecting your own facility. You can set up diversity for your community. You can connect, I believe you use parks for the emergency shelters. Like you've got the shelters for a gathering place during a major emergency. You can connect those up to a city network or even a neighborhood network. The transit, like everything, there's so many things that you can do with it. And that's the opportunity this group has. I'm not sure, it's kind of a bit of a topic where you probably have a lot of people within the community that actually have input or have some good input as to either what they'd like to see, how they'd like to see it, what they bring to the table. Like they might be a specialist in wireless, or they might know something about, like my side's the fiber cable, that's the piece I know. But one of the things I know too, and because of the timeline we're talking, I spent some time in the city of Vancouver, and one of the things that the city did was, back in around 1905, 6 or 7, a group of electrical commission from the city put in a deal with BC Tel at the time to say, whenever you put in a conduit in the ground, you put in one for us. And so what happened is, literally 100 years later, the city's still benefiting from that conduit. The earliest conduits were made out of wood. And the cities used that to connect up their city facilities. And they estimate that they save about $5 to $7 million a year by connecting up their own facilities. There's other benefits too from it, is they control the information that's on it, so there's security, they know what their network is, so there's better maintenance returns on it. There's all sorts of things that they can do as a result of that, but they started somewhere. And that's the benefit, is that there's things that you can do right now, as in putting a conduit outside of a new building or a development. You can use, if there's an abandoned water main or sewer main that's just going to be abandoned, that could be a pathway to pull a cable through in some areas. I know that Hydro TELUS is probably not the way to go, because they might see this as competition, but you've got BC Hydro that is underground ducts that go through your community, and might tie you into the wider network, because the University of Victoria here is tied in with a government cable that runs all the way from the hospital, downtown the hospital, through the university here, all the way up to a government ocean research facility in the North Peninsula there. So there's cables and there's infrastructure in place already that you could use, tie in to benefit the entire region, but specifically this neighborhood. And I think that's one thing that you might want to look into. It's something that I'm not sure, like I think most people here have a specific topic in mind that they like or would want to support, but I think that maybe over time, you put together a group of residents that, whether you do a task force or a committee or whatever you want to do, put it together, come up with ideas, and decide what you want to do for the neighborhood. Because I think you've got just an amazing opportunity here. And again, it's a lot of it is the people here tonight, and you seem to have quite a tight neighborhood compared to others that I'm familiar with in other places. And this is, like I say, a pretty unique opportunity. So I think that it benefits everybody in all the initiatives. Like, green space, you could use that pathway that goes through a park to put in a conduit system to run a cable through to connect the park. Like, again, there's public Wi-Fi, I believe, already set up, but there's other things that you could do with it to benefit the residents and the regions. So part of it's the education piece. I know that the city had applied for some smart city funding for different initiatives. So there might be funding out there if you come up with an initiative, but educate yourself, decide for yourselves what role you want to play. If this is something you want to go ahead with, because you don't have to, it's kind of already here and it's already moving, but if you want to help guide it and provide more benefit, there's a real opportunity. I say that word a lot, but like I say, identify local people who might be interested in the topic and who would want to you know, even explore the issue. Again, it's not one of those ones where you have to go this way, but I think you would benefit from exploring it, just to understand it. Part of it, and the reason the map's up there is one of the nice things is that I was told for telecom, you don't go to school for telecom. You kind of it's kind of an opportunity that you get a job there after school, and then it's you learn on the job, and everything you need to know you learn by grade 3. You draw on a map, and you color stuff in, and you count homes, and basically the map is the starting point. It's like paint by numbers. You just connect, you identify the opportunities, show the facilities that could be a housing project. That's right, I'm focusing on you. I thought you had a great presentation. You connect the dots and you say, here's the opportunities, and then you try and find a path to get there. And that path, like, there might be opportunities that get you there in 1 or 3 years, or there might be opportunities that get you there in 20 or 50 or 100 years, like the city of Vancouver. They didn't use that conduit for anything for about 70 years. And when the government changed its policies on competition, all of a sudden they had this pathway everywhere that was available to them. And so that forward-thinking idea, I think that's part of what this effort is to figure out how do we see ourselves down the road, and what steps can we take now to make that reality a reality. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, James. He said forward, and this is the forward 50. Well done. Got that forward in there. I also just want to, I was going to read this quote before James had a chance to speak, but I forgot. Now I'm going to read it now. This is from Douglas Adams, and James sent this out to me the other day. It says, so this is a quote from Douglas Adams, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy guy? So, everything that's already in the world when you were born is just normal. Anything that gets invented between then and before you turn 30 is incredibly exciting and creative, and with any luck, you can make a career out of it. And anything that gets invented after you're 30 is against the natural order of things, and the beginning of the end of civilization. Our next, I'll have to change that. Our next speaker is Eric Doherty from Echo Planning. He's going to talk about how we get around. So he's going to move you folks. Okay. The videographers.
Okay. Can y'all hear me? Okay? Okay. All right. Yeah, my name is Eric Doherty, and I've actually just moved back to Oakland. I lived here from basically 0 to age 8. We went to Oakland Elementary. I now live on Oakland Avenue, about a block from where I used to live when I was 8 years old. So I have some strange little memories of this neighborhood. Hey, and we've got a slide. All right. And I wanted to say that I've lived my whole life on Coast Salish territory. I want to acknowledge that Oakland is Lekwungen territory. And to me, part of that is acknowledging some of the Indigenous people's teachings about honoring elders. So I want to focus a little bit on elders and youth in our community as I go through a presentation that's largely about the climate emergency. And I'm saying use the term climate emergency because it is. If you may have noticed that a lot of California is on fire. A lot of communities with oak in their name, the power's out and people have been evacuated. And the future generations we used to talk to can now legally go out to the bar with you. The people whose futures are threatened are now speaking for themselves. And the fact of this is, what we know, it works. When there's less road space for cars, less parking for cars, people drive less, they ride bicycles more, they ride transit more. Next. And so when you look at a road full of cars, next, just think about the people in there and how much space those metal boxes are taking up compared to the people or people on bicycles. Next. And how much less space they would be taking up if they were on a transit bus. Next. Or a really big electric transit bus. This is a electric bus in Zurich, Switzerland, a city that has stopped flying fossil fuel powered buses. And they did this. They did a transformation of their city, moving away from automobile domination, starting to reduce the amount of parking, the amount of road space for cars. They started that in the late 1970s, after the oil crisis of 1973-74. So they had a crisis, an emergency, and they responded to it and discovered that it made the city a much nicer place to be. Next. They also discovered that a lot of this stuff doesn't have to cost a lot. You can make a bus lane. What is a bus lane? A bus lane is a piece of road and a can of paint. Next. So I want to talk a little bit about where I lived when I moved away to Vancouver. I spent about 20 years in Vancouver, and I got there in the late 90s and moved to East Vancouver, this neighborhood called Grandview Woodlands. And it was a pretty crazy place. I come from nice, quiet Victoria, where you can kind of ride your bicycle around and do all this stuff. And I tried riding my bicycle around, and it was like my stress level went through the ceiling. It was a pretty miserable place, even to walk. Even walking around the city was pretty tough. And then while I was there over 20 years, the Union Adnac bike route, Greenway, which I used as a bike route for riding bikes, my bicycle to downtown went in. And then the Lakewood Greenway went in, right near my house, which is marked the little star there. And that I use mostly just to walk to the park where there's a lake, and also to get to the main transit hub where there's a SkyTrain and an express bus to UBC. And basically, and Lakewood ended up with also a neighborhood traffic calming project, which I'll show you pictures of. The main lesson is it made my life a lot better. It wasn't like, forget the environment and all this, global warming and all this. It meant that I could go for a walk to the park and have the whole experience be relaxing, rather than walking to the park, getting all relaxed, and then having to walk down the main streets and getting unrelaxed instantly. Next. So this is one of the places on the Union Adnac bike route where I used to ride very regularly to downtown. And the point I want to make here is that not only did it make my life better, but it made it nicer in the neighborhoods I was riding through to have this traffic calming in place. That used to be a street that went straight through. It became a pocket park. Next. And then when we got to downtown, when I was riding downtown, there's protected bike lanes. So the whole thing was useful, the whole thing could be relaxing. Next. And then this is the Lakewood Greenway, just up from my house. My friend's truck is in the picture. Daniel's truck is there. And this is a diagonal diverter. This is the neighborhood traffic calming. So what this did, when this went in, there's a whole series of these diagonal diverters that prevent cars from going directly through the neighborhood. You can still go through. It just means that you have to go left you're going from downtown, out of town, you have to go left and then right, and there's stop signs at both of those places. What happened was the cars that used to try to shortcut through the neighborhood, drive very quickly, were dangerous, the dangerous drivers in the neighborhood, they disappeared within about 8 or 9 months. It wasn't the first couple of weeks, but within 8 or 9 months, the fast drivers disappeared. And all of a sudden, when the first summer of this traffic calming, it was like there was twice as many kids. It's like all of a sudden, there were children. I was like, where'd they all come from? And of course, they come out of the backyards, they come out of their video games, they're out on the street, skateboarding, playing, doing all this stuff that they weren't allowed to do before because it wasn't safe. Next. Yeah, and that really nice diagonal diverter, that's not how it was for the first year and a half. They just threw down some concrete barriers and tried it out, and it worked. That's how as a neighborhood we agreed this is a good idea. Temporary, inexpensive, what's now called tactical urbanism. You do it quickly, you try it out. If you don't like something about it, there were actually changes to the scheme in some areas. You change it. Next. And this is what's being proposed for for Beltane and Kings is basically what was done, some variation of what was done on Lakewood and the Union Ave bike route in Vancouver. Just some kind of diverters, pocket parks, those kinds of things, so that people who are coming through the neighborhood or traveling right through the neighborhood aren't going to choose that route. Still accessible to cars, but you're not going to go there unless you want to go there. Next. And I just want to point out that you've already seen some examples that I think used to be just roads that are now pocket parks or pocket plazas. Birdwood Square, next. The playground on what used to be Queens Avenue at George Day Elementary, I believe. Next. So, what I think we have as an opportunity here is that the city is planning on making a greenway on Beltane. As a neighborhood, we have a possibility, very specifically, to traffic calm this area of Oakland, the big square area bounded by Shelburne and Hillside and Bay and Cook. Traffic calm the whole thing in some way that that is acceptable to the people who live in this neighborhood, that feels good. Maybe try out a few different arrangements. Next. And that's it for my presentation. I just wanted to say that I've written an article about some of these ideas, and I brought a few printed copies with me if you want to come and talk to me after. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much, Eric. And by the way, there is some information on our table out there about the Beltane Kings project out there, so you can have a look at that. And there's a tour on November the 2nd that the city's putting on about Beltane. And next we're going to have a breath of fresh air from Melissa Lynn and Scott Murdoch. And they're going to be talking about how we integrate the natural environment into our developments, I believe.
We're going to try to do that. I might stand by the computer just to see our slides as we go here. Right on. Okay, this is the landscape that we envisioned for Oakland's in 50 years. I'm a fisheries biologist and a landscape architect. I started off as a fish biologist, and I've just taken that fishiness right into our landscape design. So I want you to think of Oakland as a place that in the future, you know, your houses and the mall and all these other buildings and roads, all that water coming off of it could support fish. that would be, I think, a very good goal for landscape design. And so that's how we think of landscape, functional landscapes, rather than rhododendrons and frilly plants all the time. We're thinking of functional landscapes and how we incorporate that into buildings. So I'm going to talk about how landscape functions, how we've changed that, some of the building blocks we have for using landscape to adapt to the climate change that we know that are coming. And then Melissa's going to talk about some examples locally and elsewhere of what living and functional landscapes are. So we always think about context and where we are. So this is just a slide we threw together that shows the Oaklands neighborhood, and it's sort of split between two watersheds. It kind of goes into the Rock Bay drainage towards the gorge, the Inner Harbor, and you also drain towards Bowker Creek. And the only real streams that are producing fish right now are the Colquitts and the Crayflower. All those other little streams are either semi-buried or completely buried or just totally non-functional. So we're going to talk about why that is, and then maybe how, in the long term, we could actually make these more functional streams again. Oh, we're stuck. There we go. So this is just a slide Melissa pulled together of the neighborhood, but on the left, it just shows like what we think of landscape, how it's changed over time. So where we are right now could have been a meadow or a forest or a depression with water in it, but it's a building now. And you can see, like in the 1880s, that photo. These photos are all from Mount Ptolemy, looking towards Mount Dove there, and just a time series. But we cleared the land when everyone came because they needed to make food. In the 70s, we weren't having to make as much food; we were importing it, so we started to build places. We built roads, and we've continued to build and expand until we have the landscape that we have today. Next one there, Melissa. So this just shows the red is impervious areas, so like rooftops, roads, and the green is green. It's shrubs, it's trees, it's grass. But you can see there's a lot of red, and all that red is making water that goes somewhere. Next one there, Melissa. So this is where it goes into storm drain system. These are the two watersheds, and it shows the storm drain systems that the municipalities have built over the last 100, 150 years. We have pipes in Victoria that are 100 years old. And these are what used to be the streams. So those used to be the drainage channels that just popped up there. Bowker, these watersheds probably have 100 times more channels than they used to have. And that keeps our roads and our houses dry, but it's terrible for streams and for fish. Next one. So this is how our natural landscape used to function. Most of the water that fell on the land never got to the ground. It got hung up in trees, it evaporated. What did hit the ground was sucked up by the trees and plants, and evapotranspiration occurred. And so not a lot of water actually went anywhere. And then it formed puddles. We had really rough landscapes. And then it slowly makes its way to our streams. Whereas now, we've got rid of a lot of forest cover. All the water comes down, hits a surface, or a hard surface or road, and then we don't want it sitting there because we don't like getting splashed by puddles or getting our feet wet. So we get rid of that water really fast in our storm drain systems. And it takes all that pollution that's on our buildings, on our roofs, that's on our roads, and it dumps it in the nearest water body, which here is either the ocean, which contains valuable marine habitat, or into our local streams like Bowker Creek or Colquitts Creek or what have you. Next one. So that's sort of how streams work and watersheds function and how we've changed that. And now we're seeing other changes that are occurring. We're going to see more with climate change. We're going to see more intense and more frequent storm events. So we're going to be wetter than we used to be. And when it's wet, it's going to be like a lot wetter and more intense. And then in our summers, we're going to experience drier summers, more drought. We've had a few years, this year seemed to be like a wet year, really. But previous years, we had 13 or 14 weeks with no precipitation, basically. Well, how do we have an urban landscape? How do we support streams when that happens? And temperature, we're going to be warmer. So Next one there. So, you know, which landscape is more adaptable to climate change? I would say the one on the left. You know, it can absorb those changes, whereas our urban systems, they flood when we get too much. Next slide. And you know, so what are some of the building blocks that we have? Like, what can we incorporate into our urban settings that would be useful for streams and to take care of water? And one of the biggest ones is soil. We tend to get rid of the soil as soon as we build a house. We strip the land, we get rid of that soil, and you know, we have clay soils left over. So that soil is really important. It's full of life. It's actually a big carbon sink, and you know, we need that to support plants and life. The plants that grow in it, a lot of root systems, different root systems. Most native plants have really deep root systems, whereas our a lot of ornamental lawns, you know, the roots are only this long. That's why you have to water your lawn like an inch of water every week, or it goes brown. By the way, just let it go brown and it'll come back. Next, and then when we start to combine these together, we start to see where, you know, trees in our urban systems can have a huge impact on the quality of our life. They can make it nice and shady, make a real comfortable space for us, but they're doing all these other functions for us, like stormwater management. They're sucking up water, they're cleaning our air, and that water gets cleaned, and then that can slowly go back to our fish stream. Next one, Melissa. This is our transition. Here we go.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you. So what does integrating natural function to urban landscape look like? Does it look like a forest on the left? Probably not. Unfortunately, we're not talking about restoring landscape back to the historical function. We're talking about creating new landscapes that mimic the natural functions of a forest. So here's the old school approach to stormwater management, and this is what it looks like. Old school approach is to get.
It's gonna increase the volume. Excuse me. Comic relief.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So this is what the old school approach to stormwater management looks like. You're getting the water as quickly as possible off those roofs, off those parking surfaces, off those roads, down the drain, and into our downstream and marine environments. Current best practice is to intercept that water in the landscape first. We slow it down, we cool it, it infiltrates, and then it overflows into those storm drains and is dispersed into the marine environment. But there's often not enough room. Impervious surfaces like buildings, parking, driveways, roads, walkways are the priorities. To move forward, we need to see a shift in values. Stormwater management in landscape needs to be essential, not nice to have. And maybe those roads and buildings and parking lots get a little bit smaller, and the functional landscapes get a little bit bigger in the future. And here's why. The future might look kind of scary like these photos. We've got more and more impervious surface in our urban environment, and that means we have more and more stormwater rushing through our pipes into the marine environments, and that leaves us at risk for flooding due to these larger rain events that we're gonna be expecting. So, what does a functional landscape look like? Now I'm going to show you a bunch of pretty photos that hopefully get you excited about stormwater management. So this is Trent Street Rain Garden. This is one of the first rain gardens built in City of Victoria in a boulevard. And I'm just going to go through quickly how it works. The water comes off the street through storm drain and into Beaver Creek. This is another local example, and in this example, the developer invested in Boulevard Rain Gardens. So the developer built these rain gardens that take runoff from the street, and using much the same method as the Trent Street Rain Garden, the water is cooled, filtered, cleaned before it goes into the storm drain. And if you have a chance to go by there, this is 800 Yates on Blanchard and Yates. Look at the trees. They were planted less than 10 years ago. Look at the size of those trees. They're very happy. So this is an example on the Greenway. This is near the Cecilia Ravine Park. It's a little entrance to the Galloping Goose in that section. And there's terraced rain gardens that take the stormwater before it enters into the gorge. Another great Greenway example. This is in Seattle, and it's in a commercial district. And the way they've done the plantings, it really blurs the line between streetscape and park and Greenway. And it's a great community space. In the residential landscape, this is a local example where the homeowner turns their whole front yard into a rain garden. The roof runoff goes into a cistern, and then which is then piped to this little bowl. It bubbles up and overflows into the rain garden. I think it's nicer than a lawn. So this is another example, much more formal. Not all rain gardens need to look the same. They can be much different styles. And this is an example from Seattle again on a much larger scale. This is a housing development where they took a holistic approach to managing stormwater. So they've got boulevard rain gardens and landscape-based stormwater management throughout the whole development. That's what that looks like. Functional landscape and public parks. You might recognize this park. It's Oswald Park. The city implemented 2 rain gardens to deal with some drainage issues they had there. So they had a few wet areas, and these rain gardens were implemented and planted with native species. Fisherman's Wharf Park, right near Fisherman's Wharf. This rain garden is right near the bottom of the watershed, so it's intercepting a large volume of water. It's a very large rain garden, and it does a lot of work before that water enters the inner harbor. I really like this picture from London. Rain gardens can be play spaces too. And they're a place for pollinators as well. So integrating functional landscapes into developments. This diagram kind of shows how buildings can take a holistic approach to managing stormwater. In this example, the stormwater comes from the roof, is directed to a cistern, which is then reused for toilets and irrigation, and all the overflow goes into the landscape up front. This building is in the Selkirk waterfront. Same kind of idea. The roof rainwater comes into a large wood cistern in front, which is then piped to this water feature, sprays out into the landscape. So it's a really fun and dynamic expression. When it rains, the water feature reds. And another really cute downspout by the Anacortes. And finally, a library example where there's an educational component and also stormwater management in a parking lot. So, Forward 50, 2019, this is going back to our map of Oakland's.
so much, Scott and Melissa. Water is a resource, right? So we want to collect water and be able to use it. And so that's the way to do it. Green gardens look pretty beautiful. You all might be hungry. It's been a long time since dinner. So I don't know what you had for dinner, but if you think about it, where did your food come from? How far did it travel? Will you be able to eat those kinds of things in the future? There's a whole concept now about future foods too. If you're going to talk about that, but here's Linda Gagey, who's going to talk about what we eat.
Hi everyone. Get my lid down here. Okay, I'll hold it too. I actually have a really loud voice, but that's what my kids say anyways. But I think the microphone helps for the recording too, right? All right. I'm Linda Gagey, and I work with an organization called CR Fair with the Capital Region Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable. We're all about promoting healthy and sustainable food systems. And I was really excited to be invited to come here tonight and see that food is being considered in your community planning process. And thinking about food is in planning is it's gaining momentum. It's been happening for a number of years now, but it's really exciting to see. I don't know about you guys, but all of this food for thought, there's my first pun, all of this food for thought we've been getting tonight is really getting those juices flowing, and I can see the intersection related to so many of the topics that are with food. And that's the thing that I find really exciting about food, is that it's a very powerful connector of when we think about just basic necessities and which is eating, we need to nourish ourselves, but also how that relates to our quality of life. Through not only, we know that food is a great connector for, as I said, eating and your health, but also where our food comes from is completely integrated into our ecosystems in providing that sustenance for us. Also, when we think about economic opportunity and prosperity, food and there's so many, it's a growing business. Local food is such a growing demand in the marketplace right now. We're seeing a lot of the larger retailers really getting on side to start supporting local food production because that's what people are looking for. So I want to start by connecting the dots between food and all of these different things that we've been talking about. The first thing, though, that we need to talk about is that 80% of our food actually comes from the global food system. And that means has real benefits, but it also, especially when we're thinking about the next 50 years, is something that we're really going to have to contend with, because we're seeing that the global food system is going to change radically in the next 50 years. And that's from, we know that climate change, number one thing on everybody's mind tonight, almost a lot of people talking about it in our new reality that we're grappling with. And the global food system is is probably about at least a third to a half, depending on how you calculate it, contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And methane, one of the badasses of greenhouse gases, is 40% of methane comes from agriculture. So the IPCC panel talks about, we heard Trevor talking about the one planet concept. Right now, we already use up to 1/3 of our Earth's ecosystems just to service our food and sustenance needs. That doesn't include any other of the millions of species on the planet, just us. And so we're going to see there's radical change in ecosystems and loss of species. Some of our favorite food species, some of our favorite food sources are going to just not be there for us anymore. So that's lots of change on a global scale, and 80% of our food does come from that global marketplace. So that's something that we really need to think about, and what does it mean for Oaklands? And we need to be thinking about, you know, that think global, act local. And one of the things that I come back to and think about this, well, we talked about this, the probable trajectory and the preferential trajectory. Well, the preferential trajectory is usually based on our values. What is it that we really value and care about, and how is that going to guide us going forward? And there's been a lot of conversation lately around, well, starting back in 2008, we created a food charter for the region, looking at what is it that we really value about our food, and how do we do better for ensuring that those values are being realized through our food system. And there's a whole network called the Good Food Network in the region that's growing. There's over 1,500 members, over 100 organizations involved, and they've been developing, trying to really understand about what we value in this region about food, and also what's a strategy to help us have a food system that reflects those values. And these are the things that we're hearing, is that, you know, food is central to our culture. It's to be celebrated, and it creates vibrancy in our communities, and our families, and our communities. That there needs to be good food for everyone. So this equity question that we talk about, social justice question, going forward, you know, how do we ensure that, just as we have housing affordability, that food is accessible to everyone, and not just cheap food, but good food, food that is nutritional and healthy. And that the food system is primarily place-based and regenerative. I mean, this is within the global context. This is a really important thing, and the UN Rapporteur, who studied food systems and looked at sustainability, really suggested that small-scale, intensive, regionally based food systems is the way that the future needs to go. And that food promotes health and well-being. We know that there's lots of things called food out there, but really what it is that's nourishing us is important to understand our food system, understand how to prepare and cook meals, and being able to relate that to what's keeping us healthy and happy. So this regional food strategy is something that's working towards this. And Ben Clark did a study around Oaklands in particular, and it really, I read through the study again just recently to see there's a strong alignment between what Ben looked at in Oaklands and what is being suggested in terms of our regional strategy. And the things that people care about in Oaklands are very similar to what we care about regionally. I think there's a strong local food movement, and people are understanding more about the relationship to health and the environment. And so one of the things that Ben did was he mapped the assets that Oakland has and is developing around food. And I thought this was really important because he looked at it from the lens of the values that we have around food, and looked at, well, first of all, that food is fairly accessible in Oakland in terms of there's grocery stores, but there's also the local general and good food boxes that provide fresh fruits and vegetables, and the Community Association plays a role in helping distribute those good food boxes. The Community Association also does community dinners, and I saw that there's a seniors social Christmas dinner coming up, and there's cooking classes, and there's ways for people to connect around food in community. And we know that social isolation is one of the leading, it's as detrimental to our health as smoking. And food is one of those things that brings community together, brings people together to celebrate. And probably the gold star in Oakland in terms of bringing people together and celebrating food is the Oakland Sunset Market. That has been an amazing vehicle for not only that community building aspect that it has, but also it's been an incubator for local food businesses. It's been a place where I've heard of the music being played by the kids, and people really coming together to celebrate what's good about Oaklands. And also you can access fresh fruits and vegetables at the market, and also really good food. And that's to me, that's hitting a lot of this multifunctionality, where we see something that's being done that's really valuable in so many different levels. The other thing that we have that we were talking about a little bit is public land and land, and as we have increasing pressures on Oaklands, just as everyone else in the region, in terms of population growth. I mean, we're slated to have heavy population growth in the next 30 years, and we do have city-owned parkland, and there's boulevards, there's the school district lands, and there's a really important job to be done to really look carefully at the pressures on those lands, and also how can those lands be part of our foodscape and our food system, as they're also managing rainwater and creating recreation and supporting pollinators and all of those things that we need to be happening. So really trying to look at the multifunctionality of the land. And I think another good thing is I saw, even back in 1993, Oaklands was thinking about the importance of community gardens and demonstration sites for learning and inspiring people and connecting people to their food. And now Oswald Park is being looked at, and a process being moved forward there to develop a community garden. That was seeded in 1993, like ages ago. I was just getting my feet wet in food systems work then. And it's really important to understand, though, that in this urban environment with the pressures on the land, that we need, we're going to be limited by the amount that we can grow in urban environments. Although there's just a new market being developed in Paris that is maybe a little bit smaller than Hillside Mall, and it is producing 2,000 pounds of food a day for the community around that market. And so it's not only, it's a food market, and it's a growing space, and it incubates local food businesses. And when we're talking about Hillside Mall and where that can go in the future, these are the kinds of things that, recreation, yes, shopping, yes, food, yes, like that's something we should be thinking about. So we are going to be limited a little bit by the physical environment, but we can see growing on vertical spaces, on rooftops, and using edible indigenous plants as well in terms of our parkland and also in our gardens. So there's lots of opportunity there, but we need to also be looking at not sprawling out over to our rural lands. So the urban containment boundary, like it's not an Oakland's thing, but Oakland's people need to understand how important that urban containment boundary is to our long-term sustainability here. It keeps urban sprawl from all those important, productive, really rare lands now. As we have more increasing pressure, it's just going to continue to pressure on those areas. So the urban containment boundary and things like the Foodlands Trust, which is trying to put land in public land into production or provide opportunity for new entrants, new farmers to get onto it, are super important initiatives. Okay, the other thing is obviously that increasing population in Oakland is going to create real competition for housing and land, and I really loved what Nicole was talking about in terms of housing affordability, because one of the greatest indicators of food insecurity is the cost of housing. That's the bill that has to get paid first. And so the more affordable housing is, the more resources we have for those other things that we need to take care of in our lives. And so when we have low incomes, that is, people become food insecure very quickly when there's the precariousness and the cost of housing. So Oakland, I talked a lot about the things that Oakland is really doing well. Like they're really great, visionary, creative activities that are creating a real sense of community, but also a local food system here. So there's tons more work to do to integrate all of these different pieces that we've been talking about tonight into this long-term plan and vision. But I think I just had a few small takeaways that I wanted to leave you with, and I see the intersection with a lot of the other presenters, and what they've talked about is Trevor started out with the land and seas that we have, that's all we have. And we're actually being pretty greedy right now in the amount of resources that we as one species are using. So that's something that we need to think about in the future. And the need to start having a cultural shift now to understand that limit to we're very ambitious, and yet we can turn our ambition into much more sustainable and regenerative solutions. And that requires a different way of thinking and acting and behaviors. And there's a whole range of things that we need to do to support that in our communities. So I'll just say the Oaklands Market is an example of something that makes it easy to find ways to live by your values if you can. And good food can be a driving value for planning. We're seeing it all over the places. Like good food solutions are actually great planning solutions. And we'll just talk about the multifunctionality of boulevards. The whole corners and the boulevards that were started to create there, they actually influenced city policy to change and to support boulevards more widely in boulevard plantings more widely in the city, and the City of Victoria developing actual policy around that. So Oakland's an area is really building good foundations for the future right now with the things that they're already doing, and that's come a lot of like community ideas and things like the community association really supporting and nurturing and incubating those things to move forward. And the City of Victoria also getting on side. They have a very strong food chapter in the city plan, and that's helping support through other growing in the city programs to support these kinds of things. New foodways must be forged. We're going to meet up against a lot of challenges in terms of that global food system, and we're going to have to find ways through that, but the creativity is here. It's exciting. And the other thing is diversity is so resilient. So, there's not one pathway, there's many pathways forward here, and we're seeing lots of great solutions coming forward. And the more things that our solutions can satisfy in terms of our values, that's really exciting. And we also saw Eva come up and talk about what youth wanted to see. And I think we have to always be thinking about the diversity in our residents and who's at the table and whose voices are heard. And that is going to create the most resilient and a place where people really want to live and where they really can live and they can be healthy and thrive. And so, ensuring that we're really trying to reach out and have diversity in terms of both our solutions, but also our involvement and engagement in the process. So food is the great, powerful connector, and I just want to continue to be a support and also to urge that food is part of this planning process, and that it will bring people out and it will bring them together. So thank you so much for your
Thank you so much, Linda. Food, yeah, that's important stuff. I'm going to be slightly apocalyptic here for a minute. If 80% of our food comes from a global food chain, what happens if we have a major earthquake and the BC ferries can't run for a long time? Just saying, what's going to happen with food? Anyway, just leave it with that. Next we have Peter Elkins. He's going to talk a little bit about how we bring the middle class back into our lives here in Oakland. Because, as you know, the middle class have a tendency to be progressive drivers and chart paths to things, but if they're not around, then it's going to be a challenge. So, Peter, I'll put your slide up.
Thank you for being patient and waiting till the end of the evening. It's nice to see everybody's still here. I really want to talk about impact investing tonight. And before I do, I actually want to give Nicole a lot of credit for this. enhancing the community economic development. So everything I'm doing in Victoria, I can actually bring right back to Nicole as the starting point. So I just want to say that I have a lot of support for her ideas. So what I've been doing, I mean, I have an endless history of different things, but always in the entrepreneurial space. My family's from the Gulf Islands, so my values are very much the values of small community, but I also have a lot of international business experience and as well as entrepreneurial experience. I've actually grown a very large medical device company in Vancouver before I moved here. And again, Nicole set me on this odyssey around community economic development. So this slide really represents a lot of struggle for me into one slide about trying to figure out how to put all this together. And I think I finally come up with one of the solutions that I want to start sharing with people. And I'll work through this and then kind of bring back some thoughts around it. But what I'm saying is that for most communities and in the emerging economy, land is still the asset. So we can debate policy, we can debate taxation, we can debate all that. But at the end of the day, we're in a culture that's globalized, we're in a culture that land's the value. So we're going to start with that premise. And most communities, that really is, I mean, even the city of Victoria, right? The urban development is bringing in that tax base. So I started asking myself, how do we actually bring money into the impact investment space? And I've been in this kind of world for quite a few years in the venture capital, and I realized that there was nothing scalable in our communities. So there's lots of small businesses that have impact that you can invest in, but there was nothing that would ever attract foundation money, endowment money, pension money, the money that actually our citizenship is putting into their long-term financial planning for retirement. There was nowhere for that money ever to go. And you'll hear it all the time where foundations will say, we really like to do impact investing. How do we do it? University students are protesting constantly about the university money getting put into impact. And there really was no vehicle. So because land in Canada is the asset, what I realized was that there is a vehicle, and it's been around since 1973, and it's called a Mortgage Investment Corporation. There's two of them in Victoria, you've probably seen advertised. One's Fiskard, and the other one is Cooper Pacific. And what they do is high interest mortgages for people that don't qualify for bank mortgages. So that's the legal taxation vehicle that I grabbed onto when I started thinking about this. And what I did is I shifted the lens to say, well, what if we actually gave competitive interest rates to the banks? What if we thought of this as impact? And what if we thought about who our target customer would be? And here's where it comes back to the Gulf Islands. So my parents live on Hornby Island. The entire workforce there lived there because they could afford real estate in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Since, 1990-something, people can't afford to live there anymore. So that entire workforce disappeared. The people that live there now that look after my parents live in abject poverty, trailers on people's property. They get kicked out of their houses every spring so that people from the city can rent the house in the summer. And it really caught my attention. So that was the canary in the coal mine for me. And so I thought, okay, well, what would that look like? And when I looked at the southern Gulf Islands, I saw the same thing. And I realized that there's an incredible body of money in British Columbia or in Canada that has no way to invest in impact investing that could actually provide mortgages to those people providing services in our community. And when you get into places like Kelowna, Vancouver, Victoria, it's now become unaffordable. So when I think about this, I think about skilled tradespeople, people that have chosen to do the jobs we need that can't buy a house. They want to buy a house, they can't afford to buy a house. Single income, there's a woman actually that I realized with the Smart City, Colleen McCormick. She's with Connected Communities BC. She's an executive director with a master's degree with BC government. She can't afford to live here. So, people are leaving that are really valuable to these communities. And so as I kind of rolled this out, then I started thinking about, okay, now I've got this legal vehicle, and it's actually, it's a flow-through vehicle. It's got incredible tax benefits. You can actually put in your RSPs. So anybody in this room could say, I'll put in, 1% of my retirement fund into that. That's, there's so many ways we can collect money, but it also puts pressure on the foundations, the endowments, and ultimately the pension plans to say, we now have a vehicle you can invest in. You no longer can say, we can't do impact investing, and that's really the lobby work. So we don't need policy change, we don't need legislation change. What we housing affordability for working people. So think those essential services of choosing professions like healthcare, education, public safety, skilled tradespeople, that we want in our communities that can't actually afford to buy a house and want to own one. So then we can start issuing mortgages, and this is where it gets interesting to the individual. So typically a mortgage, you have a couple caveats that make it stressful right now. One is the stress test. So they're actually saying, can this person afford this mortgage if inflation happens? The other one is the amortization periods are fixed, so now you've got a very large payment, and the loan to value ratios are quite low, so you actually have to have a pretty big down payment. I like to refer to that as the bank of mom and dad. So this actually solves the bank of mom and dad problem, because I would argue if mom and dad should put money in this fund, their children can access the fund, and the parents aren't actually giving the money, they're investing the money. So there's a win-win there. And what we'll do is we'll actually look at what people pay the rent as the one of the deciding factors, and also look at character. And this goes back to a lot of the stuff Nicole taught me about. It's really that community-based kitchen table, I think is how you refer to it. You know, the kitchen table conversation. And I met with a business owner, Victoria, today that owns an insulation company. And you know, and I always say to people, like, close your eyes and think of 3 people in your life that you don't want to buy a house, that can't afford to buy a house, that you absolutely know could afford the payment and provide a valuable service, volunteer and paid in our community. We can all think of those people. So my thought is how do we get to that character-based reference? And that goes back to the micro-lending idea of, you know, does an employer get an email saying, you know, is this person somebody that you refer? And there's different ways you can do that. And then we've also started talking about how we solve social housing problems. So for example, First Nations mortgages on reserve. This actually can start addressing those issues, whereas typical banks like Royal Bank has one product, but like Van City's having a hard time actually building a product for that. So because this isn't under the same regulations and rules as traditional lenders, we actually have a lot of flexibility with the amortization and the loan to value ratio. So go back to the single parent, one's single family income, good job, excellent job, government job. You know, they're the only reason they're ever going to leave is they're going to get sick or quit because they're frustrated, but they're always going to have that job. They can't get a down payment because now they have 3 children and their life has just become that way. And they can afford the payment with the longer amortization period, but they can't, they couldn't go to a traditional mortgage because the payment would be more than 1/3 of their income. And that goes back to food. My argument is that these payments should be the rent, and it should be less than 1/3 of their income, so they actually can get back to that. And that kind of goes to what Chris was saying around the middle class. So then you ask yourself as an investor, so if we're giving out mortgages at say 3.5% or whatever the current rate is, how do we get the return for the investor that's going to be attractive? And this is where it got interesting for me from my financial background, is you actually only have to issue 50% of the fund to mortgages. The other 50% of the fund you can do what you want with. And I've worked in economic development, community economic development, venture capital. You know, I've built most of the startup financing networks. And where this really got exciting for me is I realized we could actually do a bunch of other things with this fund, because my original thesis was you need a venture capital fund and a mortgage fund. This can actually do both in one. So the money coming in can go one direction. The money going out can go in multiple directions, and that can improve the ROI, so the return on investment for the person actually putting money in. And we also built a calculator that you can actually tell us what the return is you want. So if you want to do more investment with good, you can actually say, I only want X% in return because I'd like to see more good work being done. So we have endless flexibility with this, which makes it really exciting. And so what does that look like? So I've partnered and started a conversation with Bank of Bradley University, and I'd say we could apply this to Oaklands. They've been granted by the provincial government, they can actually do housing on the university endowment land, similar to what UBC did. So they can actually start generating revenue for the university to pay for operating costs by doing housing development. So with this mechanism, we can take money in, we can do construction financing, which is a common thing already. It's high interest, so it's a competitive market. So we can actually take the money in, finance the pre-construction, the construction of that development, and we can actually issue the mortgages to the people they want in there and cycle that money through. We can also do something called prompt payment, which is the bridge financing. So there's a huge multi-billion-dollar problem in our province right now where contractors aren't actually getting paid within the term. So the people building all this stuff are waiting 90, 120, 200 days to actually get paid, the $10,000 painting contract. And so there's something called prompt payments. So we could actually start doing prompt payments where people would, that are actually doing the work could get the money quicker. So we're now financing that part of the development. And then the part that really got me excited, and this actually came out again from Nicole, a guy named Looney lives in Seattle. He spent his life financing software startups, and now he has something called Fledge, which is a impact fund and accelerator program in Seattle. I think it's actually probably one of the best ones I've seen in the world. And he discovered revenue-based financing, which actually comes from the oil and gas and film industry. And what that says is you can finance top-line revenue of companies. So if you think of every business in Oakland, every succession plan of every business in Oakland, all those pieces, we can actually finance that at a very low risk because they already have revenue. We can finance against the revenue. So we're not doing this kind of high-risk private equity startup building, high-risk businesses. And so revenue-based financing also makes this really exciting when you start thinking about succession planning. So again, we have a massive issue coming up in British Columbia where a lot of these companies don't have kids or families that want to take them over. They'll be taken over by employees. It's called employee share ownership programs. How would that get financed? We can actually start financing that. So when you look at this as community economic development, it gets really interesting because not only are we providing mortgages to the houses, not only are we able to finance these interesting or high-risk development projects around social housing or around market housing, but we can also start financing businesses, and all the money can go in the same direction and just come out in different ways. And we don't necessarily have to manage that. We could do it through fund of funds. There's lots of mechanisms. And then the return on investment is really, we are actually getting a real investment. So this is your retirement dollars going into the fund. We're getting that return, but we're also doing the community benefit. And I like the word venture philanthropy, but it's not the right word. But my feeling now is that all the money that's in these endowments, trusts, foundations, pensions, they actually leave our communities and they actually leave our country. And so I'm saying we can actually bring that money back to support the local community, still get the return they're looking for, and actually do better work. And then taking that one step further back to the actual consumers. You can think about impact investment, you can do responsible investment, you can build your portfolio around responsible investment, but there really isn't a scalable, risk reduction mechanism for impact investment until this. So that's kind of where it's at today. I've partnered with the BC Construction Association. We're partnering with public safety, healthcare, and teachers. That's kind of the conversations that are going on now. And my hope is this is a nonpartisan alternative to financing mortgages. So until we solve the legislation, taxation, all those bigger issues, we actually can keep British Columbians and Canadians in the houses and in the communities. And back to what Chris said a minute ago about food security. So the statistic I've heard, two statistics I've heard is one, we have 24 hours of food supply in Vancouver Island. I think that's 3 days. Yeah, and the other one that's really interesting is the City of Vancouver, the police department did some work, and with healthcare. So if there's a natural disaster in the City of Vancouver, police, fire, ambulance, and hospitals will shut down within 14 hours of that disaster if the bridge is closed. So there's so many reasons to get people back into these communities and living in these communities because, right now if you live in the City of Vancouver, you're really going to want to be in Coquitlam or Pitt Meadows if there's a disaster because that's where your public safety and healthcare workers are commuting from. So we have a solution now, and really my ask to you is to socialize this, talk about it, bring it up with politicians, bring it up with pension funds, trusts, the university, Victoria Foundation, just keep this conversation going forward. And, and what I really want them to do is really take this seriously and think about how they can invest in it and why they should and see how far we can get that conversation going a little quicker. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
This is a very important thing to me. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. As a human being to other human beings, I deeply appreciate the leadership you are showing by coming out tonight to think about these issues because our children and grandchildren congratulate all of you for coming out and thinking about these issues. And please keep these conversations going, and let's make Oakland's a model for other communities.